The Radical Power of Forgiveness. What I learned from Tajuana Hill. The first time I heard Tajuana Hill speak about forgiveness, I felt something shift inside me. That rare moment when you encounter wisdom so profound it feels like the universe conspired to place those words directly in your path. Tawana isn't just a thought leader or speaker. She's a force of nature whose insights on forgiveness have transformed countless lives, particularly among Black women who rarely get permission to prioritize their own healing. I recently had the privilege of interviewing Tawana, and what struck me wasn't just her eloquence, but the hard earned truth behind her words. She spent years walking alongside women through their darkest moments, holding space for their pain while guiding them toward liberation. Her work has created ripples of healing that extend far beyond individual lives into families, communities, and institutions. In a world obsessed with revenge narratives, Tawana dares to champion a different path, one that leads not to weakness, but to profound power. Let me be clear about something right away. The forgiveness Tawana speaks of isn't the Hallmark card version. It's not about spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. It's not about pretending harm didn't occur. The forgiveness she advocates is fierce, revolutionary, and sometimes it's the only path forward when life has broken you open completely. What does it mean to truly forgive? Not the superficial, let's just move on that we're often pressured into, but the kind that saves your life when you're drowning in grief, betrayal, or rage. Imagine this with me. A mother wakes up every morning to the weight of unimaginable absence. Not one, but two sons gone forever. The same body that carried those children now battles lupus and endures grand mal seizures. Every day brings physical pain layered atop emotional agony. Yet somehow this woman chose to forgive those responsible for her children's deaths. This isn't fiction. This is one of the stories Tahuana shared with me. A Black mother whose name remains private, but whose courage deserves to be known. When she chose forgiveness, her community questioned her. Some even condemned her. How could you forgive them? They demanded. Where is your anger, your fight? What they didn't understand was that her forgiveness wasn't surrender, it was survival. Holding on to that hatred was killing me faster than my lupus ever could, she told Tawana. Every seizure got worse. Every flare up lasted longer. My body was carrying what my heart couldn't bear anymore. This mother didn't forgive because what happened was okay. She forgave because she refused to let tragedy claim a third victim, herself. And here's what happened. As she released that burden, something shifted. Her health didn't magically perfect itself, but the constant inflammation of rage began to subside. She found strength she didn't know she had. She created a nonprofit that now helps other grieving families find healing through self forgiveness practices. Her pain became purpose. This is the first truth Tawana Hill illuminated for me. Forgiveness is not about excusing wrongs, it's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment and pain. Now, I can almost hear what some of you are thinking. That's a beautiful story, but it's not realistic. Not for what I've been through, not for what was done to me. I get it. Forgiveness sounds beautiful in theory and feels nearly impossible in practice, especially when the wounds are still fresh, especially when justice hasn't been served, especially when society keeps telling Black women to be strong instead of soft, resilient instead of vulnerable. Which brings me to another story Tahuana shared, one that challenges our understanding of professional power. Picture a Black female entrepreneur who built her business from nothing, only to have former partners sabotage her reputation with damaging rumors during a critical growth phase. As her company's revenues plummeted, her lupus flared, triggered by the stress and betrayal. She had every legal right to pursue retribution. She had evidence. She had grounds for a lawsuit that could have bankrupted those who wronged her. Instead, she did something radical. At an industry conference in front of peers, competitors, and potential clients, she publicly forgave those who had tried to destroy her business. Not with a saccharine speech about letting bygones be bygones, but with a clear eyed acknowledgement of what had happened, followed by her conscious choice to move forward without vengeance. I could spend the next 3 years in litigation, she stated, or I could spend those years building something beautiful. I choose creation over destruction. I choose to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because my vision deserves my full energy. The business community was stunned. Some called her naive. But within 6 months, her client base had not only recovered, but expanded. People who had never heard of her company were drawn to her integrity. She received regional recognition for ethical leadership, and local business incubators now cite her example when teaching conflict resolution. This is the second truth Tajuana Hill emphasized. Forgiveness can be a catalyst for healing and growth, opening doors that remaining locked in resentment keeps firmly shut. But forgiveness isn't just personal, it's communal. And sometimes the hardest entities to forgive are the systems and institutions that repeatedly fail us. Consider the coalition of Black women with chronic illnesses that Tawana described, advocates fighting for better healthcare access in underserved communities. Year after year, city officials ignored their proposals. Funding was repeatedly denied, promises were broken. The frustration mounted as systemic bias against minority led initiatives became increasingly obvious. After 5 years of advocacy with little progress, these women made a strategic decision. Instead of continuing adversarial approaches, they extended olive branches. They organized listening sessions where officials could speak without fear of being attacked for past failures. They reframed discussions around shared goals rather than revisiting old grievances. Was it fair that they had to be the bigger people? Absolutely not. Was it effective? Undeniably, their willingness to forgive institutional slights without forgetting them created space for new partnerships. Eventually, they secured a $250,000 grant for mobile clinics serving neighborhoods that had been healthcare deserts for generations. Their approach has become a blueprint for other advocacy groups seeking reconciliation driven change. This is the third truth Tawana Hill shared. When Black professionals and entrepreneurs model forgiveness publicly, it sets a powerful example that fosters resilience, unity, and hope among others facing similar struggles. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That's nice for them, but you don't know what I've been through. You don't know who hurt me. You don't know what I've lost. You're right. I don't. And Tawana would be the first to acknowledge that forgiveness isn't a one size fits all prescription. It's not a checkbox to tick. It's a process, often a long, messy, non-linear one. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it requires professional support. Sometimes it means forgiving yourself first for how long you've carried the pain. But here's what Tawana Hill wants you to consider. What if holding on to unforgiveness is actually holding you back? What if the person suffering most from your perfectly justified resentment is You. The women in these stories didn't forgive because they were saints. They forgave because they were survivors who refused to let pain have the final word in their stories. They forgave because they recognized a profound truth. Resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So, where do we go from here? How do we move from inspiration to action? Tajuana Hill offers this challenge. Identify one person or institution you need to forgive today. Write down what you're releasing yourself from emotionally if you let go of this burden. Then commit to taking at least one concrete step toward practicing that forgiveness this week, even if it's only saying it out loud privately before considering whether direct contact is safe or appropriate. Remember, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation in all cases. It doesn't mean vulnerability with people who have proven themselves unsafe. It means freedom from the exhausting work of keeping anger alive. As Tawana so powerfully stated during our interview, forgiveness is not weakness. It's the ultimate form of self care for Black women who have carried everyone and everything except their own peace. In a world that profits from Black women's trauma and exhaustion, choosing forgiveness can be a revolutionary act of self preservation. It can be the difference between merely surviving and truly thriving, between existing in survival mode and stepping fully into your healing. That sacred space where you finally prioritize your peace over your pain. I want to leave you with this thought. We live in a culture that glorifies holding grudges and that celebrates cancel culture that tells us forgiveness is for the weak. But what if the opposite is true? What if forgiveness is actually the most courageous choice you could make? The mother who lost her sons, the entrepreneur who was betrayed, the advocates who faced systemic rejection. They didn't just survive their traumas, they transformed them. They didn't just endure, they evolved. And in doing so, they didn't just change their own lives, they changed the lives of everyone around them. So I challenge you today. What would your life look like if you weren't carrying the weight of unforgiveness? Who could you become if you weren't exhausting your energy on resentment? What might you create if your heart and mind were free from the constant replaying of past hurts? The path of forgiveness isn't easy, it isn't quick, but it just might be the most liberating journey you ever take. As Tawana Hill would say, forgiveness isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter, one where you, not your pain, hold the pen. The question isn't whether you can afford to forgive. The question is, can you afford not to?